This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert and Sons, seeing is believing. We lead, home is where one starts. Star Assurance, your solid partner. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, everything roofing in the best of quality. MG Auto Trading, official distributors of MG vehicles in Ghana. And CBG, we stand with you. Here are some of your comments, and we share with the rest of the world. Collins Little Tete says, what we are witnessing with the Guinea coup is a leadership problem across the African continent. Michael J. Jan Glovos says, what the soldiers did in Guinea is a counter coup, not a coup d'etat. Condé changing the constitution for a third term is the real coup. The soldiers had a mandate to counter Condé's coup. A.J. Nyavo John says, the vision of both AU and ECOWAS died with its founding fathers. All they have been doing is try and error. Can you imagine a bloc that is always firefighting instead of being proactive when problems are even staring at them in the face? They won't act until it escalates. Prince J. Anku says, what is Alassane Ouattara doing in Guinea? He got no business there. How can he be a mediator in a matter that he is also guilty of? Back in his country, ECOWAS got to be serious. Dr. Charles Rekubrobe says ECOWAS protocols and non-interference in internal affairs of member countries are mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive. That's an interesting note there. Kofi Bento says that experience is pointing to the clear position that national constitutions should be subjected to sub-regional endorsement because constitutions and their amendments create coup and sub-regional stability risks. And when these coups happen, ECOWAS is called upon to spend resources and even lives to restore normalcy. All constitutions must also have perpetual clauses which allow their reinstatement after an overthrow. And the role of ECOWAS must be well scripted so it's clear to all that no one nation can destabilize the region. Then Godwin Adawine used to be on this show a lot, says ECOWAS is losing its moral authority and political legitimacy. Citizens of the sub-region, that's what they, the coup, way for civilian leaders to manipulate, it's a way for civilian leaders to manipulate constitutional term limits. And when this leads to coups, then suddenly ECOWAS finds its voice. Most unfortunate. All right, so thanks for your messages. I'll read this last one from Alija Baka, Kipo Alija Baka. He says, the only cure for a grief is action. The coup wasn't as such an action, but a reaction against corruption, hardship, and power drunkenness. And the remaining ECOWAS membership should be celebrating this reminder and big lesson. It's a reminder and big lesson. Thanks for your messages. Now, let's go to the Ghana Bar Association and ask a few questions. We have had a couple of people make some comments about an aspect of the discussion we are going to have. So let's listen to them.
I'm afraid there's no easy way of putting this. You will have to start from getting members of the bar to to pay their taxes. The record of lawyers in paying taxes has been historically poor. It is unfortunate, but a most unpleasant fact that members of the professions in our country have not been known to set a good example when it comes to paying taxes. They appear to think that being members of the learned professions put them above complying with everyday civic duties, like paying taxes. It is embarrassing that lawyers are often at the top of the list of those who flout our tax laws and use their expertise to avoid paying taxes.
I wish to call on all of us and the nation as a whole that we collectively re-examine our ways of life and the ways of corruption that are endemic. We need to examine bribery, which have not been normalized and accepted, through gift giving, which actively seeks to influence official conduct and to the detriment of the people who by merit deserve the opportunities snatched from them, and from the people who have no monies to compete with such endemic corrupt practices, allowing the institutions of state to work. Connected to the issue of endemic corruption in our society is the whom you know practice in our society. It has become an accepted way of life that persons of power and influence interfere in official functions of public offices and exert undue influence. Such ill conduct balloons into habit and soon into culture.
A major flaw with our tax system is a phenomenon described in popular parlance as tax evasion. It is that situation of citizens and persons working in Ghana dodging their tax obligations, either by completely avoiding coming within the tax bracket when they ought to be, or deploying illegal means to minimize their tax liability through fraudulent techniques. This practice, to say the least, it is loyal to the state. Sad to say, many lawyers are caught in the phenomenon of tax evasion as they unjustifiably avoid being caught in the tax net, either by understating their profits or concealing their true income.
There is a lot of individualism that has crept into both the professions and also to the democratic process itself, where people are more concerned about themselves as opposed to looking at the general welfare of the people.
So is that what you see at the bar, that people are
it's
using their position for personal gain?
No, I'm not saying they are using their position. What I want to say is that many lawyers are now preoccupied with how much money they can make, rather than looking at the concept of justice. You know, I spent over 20 years teaching at the law school, and my emphasis to them is to say that, look, in this whole wide world, why will God choose you to be a lawyer? There must be a purpose for it. And what is the purpose? I say you are God's instrument for justice. God has chosen you and ordained you to be an instrument or a vessel for justice. So don't talk about money, because the money is not the issue. Money is a reward, and God will reward you. Not with plenty of money, as so many of them mistakenly believe, but He will make you make at least a living. And that's all you require, because after all, let's put it this way, if you have plenty of money, so what?
And so you have been listening to His Excellency the President. You heard also the President of the Bar, former, call him immediate past, Anthony Forson Jr. And then you heard the Attorney General, who is the leader of the Bar, Godfrey Dame, Yeboah, and Sam Okudjeto, senior advocates. He's a member of the Council of State. And so this dominated the Bar's annual conference in Bolgatanga at the Desert Pastures, Fountain Gate Chapel Auditorium, because that was the theme for the conference, the role that lawyers can play to maximize the country's income through taxation. And the president, who spoke on the matter, said that a recent study by the World Bank estimates that the total corporate tax gap is between 9.4% and 12.6% of GDP. 9.4% and 12.6% of GDP. That's approximately 35.7 billion Ghana cedis to 47.9 billion Ghana cedis. VAT compliance gap, he said, is 39.3% of total VAT revenue. Import duty tax gap, he said, is of 32.5% of import revenue. And listen to this, potential tax revenues from sole proprietors who usually operate in the informal sector amounted to 12.6%. 12.6% of GDP. Now the very last point. He says our potential tax base has been widened from 5 million to 15 million people, you know, because of the Ghana card, which has been converted into tin numbers. That's it. Potential tax base is now from 5 million people to 15 million people. An initial assessment of the data has, listen to this one, uncovered over 60,000 professionals, 60,000 professionals and high net worth individuals, not some common individuals, so high net worth individuals, unregistered for tax. Regrettably, several members of our esteemed legal profession fall within this bracket and will soon be receiving friendly phone calls from the tax authority. And he concluded by saying, I sincerely hope that those involved would move swiftly to regularize their tax affairs before the GRA needs to crack the whip. We need to build a culture of voluntary compliance. David, thank you very much for making the time to join us.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's hear you. What do you say? This is very sad commentary, particularly on your esteemed profession of very wealthy people.
I don't know about very wealthy, but the commentary is sad.
Well, I've been taught to know that once you're a lawyer, if you are not lazy, you will live a comfortable life, reasonably.
Generally, yes. But the commentary is sad, actually. But my sadness, quote and unquote, about the commentary is not because of the number of lawyers who allegedly or reportedly are not paying taxes. It's because I think that we are failing to understand what causes that. The problem is with the system and not with the lawyers. And give me the chance to explain what I mean. If we narrow the discussion to the fact that lawyers are getting outside the tax bracket, we are addressing the symptoms instead of the cause. Now, if you have a system where a large part of the society is generally informal, you get this, and you already gave the statistic about 12% of the gap coming from the informal sector. Let's look at how the legal profession or how practicing lawyers are set up in the first place. And this is one of the few countries in the world which are still sticking to the old tradition. Law firms here are set up mainly as partnership or as sole proprietors. If you moved the compass and you pointed to quote and unquote advanced countries, you find out that law firms are set up mainly as limited liability partnerships or as companies. Now, there are law firms in Ghana which are companies. My firm is one. Incidentally, the immediate past president of the BAS firm is one. It's very easy to go after law firms which are companies. So they do come after us, and we pay taxes. And this may surprise you to know, where we pay our tax, we are actually a large taxpayer. My firm belongs to the large taxpayers unit. Now, the way the system is organized is such that it goes after those of us in the formal sector and just keep taxing and taxing and taxing the formal sector and leaving those in the informal sector. And it's not just about lawyers. recently there was an announcement about having won an award, and a cousin of mine at GRA called me and said, "Oh, the taxman will be in the office," and I said, "They're already there." The moment you are seen to be doing well, they come after you and they audit you every year. So you are stretched. Once those who are informal and unknown are quote and unquote avoiding the system, and that's basic. Now, if you have a situation where law firms are set up largely as partnerships, the personal tax liability rests on the individual, and therefore they are not necessarily like in a corporate structure where the PAYE of the corporate entity itself tracks you to the individual. So we've had this for a very long time. The other reason about the system which really surprises me is that since 2016, we've had Act 915, which introduced the TIN number. What is so difficult about enforcing the TIN? If a lawyer has a bank account or is practicing, he necessarily must have a bank account. And if he has a bank account, he must necessarily have a TIN number. If the system is not enforcing it, then that becomes a problem. I think the other leg is that because lawyers, by their training, generally understand tax law, they are better equipped to avoid. And the situation is not necessarily one of evasion. There is one of avoidance also, and we need to look at that. If we put all these factors together,
and you need to state, you need to state immediately and explain what you mean by avoidance.
Well, avoiding tax is simply when you understand how the tax systems work, and therefore you are able to pay less than we ordinarily pay.
Which is lawful.
Yes, it's lawful. It's very lawful. Whilst evasion is simply avoiding or failing to pay the tax altogether.
Right.
If we put all these together, we have one category. Then there is a very big mistake on the part of the entire system. We seem to think that the lawyer's contribution to revenue of the nation is only as a result of his or her ability to pay tax. That is wrong. And as the discussion goes on, if you give me the chance, so I will elaborate a few. But I can point at least two situations where the nation itself indirectly finds a way of exporting the tax. You'll be surprised that there are corporate entities operating in Ghana, foreign corporate entities, who dispute outside the jurisdiction, and the dispute is over tax. And the only reason a Ghanaian lawyer comes into it is when they realize that they need an expert opinion on Ghanaian tax. Why should that dispute be settled outside the jurisdiction in the first place? The system is porous, and it allows a lot of people to escape the system. So I would rather we broaden the discussion away from how lawyers are avoiding tax to how we can ensure that the legal profession as a whole can contribute to the increase in revenue generation. And there are several examples we can discuss if you allow me.
Right. So you say that the issue is not exactly about the lawyer not paying tax or professionals not paying tax.
It is one of them, but we should not limit it to that.
But the system itself. Now, Godfrey Dame, the Attorney General, who also spoke about the issue and felt it was quite an indictment on the professionals, had some solutions. He said a lawyer must show evidence of tax before your license will be renewed. Every year we renew our license. He said this is one of the effective ways to ensure that everyone is paying tax. But he admits, and I read what he said, I must admit that the failure of lawyers in Ghana to discharge their full tax obligation is not entirely their fault. The absence of effective systems by the Ghana Revenue Authority to ensure that all potential taxpayers are brought into the tax net is majorly responsible. The GRA ought to devise the appropriate mechanisms for ensuring that the tax net is broadened to its elastic limit in order to bring within it all potential taxpayers, including all practicing lawyers. What do you say?
I agree 100% with the Attorney General. And I'll go further to look at what areas that it is that lawyers can contribute to increasing the revenue generation. One, of course, is the fact that lawyers must pay tax, and that I blame the regulator. I mean, we do pay tax. Indeed, you'll be surprised that we've had a situation where the GRA actually wrote to certain law firms in Ghana, thanking them for ensuring that not only are they paying taxes, but that their clients are also paying taxes. So there are exceptions, outliers, and we must admit it. So that's one. The second thing that we overlook is that lawyers are a key influence in policy formulation. And when you involve lawyers in policy formulation, they point out to you the loopholes in the system, which will enable you improve the closing the gaps in the tax bracket. And if you look at not only the recommendation that Attorney General made, but also the speech of Dr. Ali Nachia, he made a lot of useful suggestions as to how we can help increase revenue. That's one. The other one is the fact that lawyers are involved in numerous commercial transactions. Because many people in the society limit their knowledge of lawyers' work to that of litigation, and I will talk about litigation shortly, we tend to overlook that the real money that lawyers can help bring to the state is actually outside the court. And let me illustrate. Stamp duty is a major source of revenue to the government. And every agreement that requires a stamp duty is done by a lawyer in one form or the other. And because you have situations where lawyers are not encouraged to, quote and unquote, encourage their clients to pay stamp duty, you have a situation where there is a large amount of seepage in that system. So we have to look at how lawyers can help generate more revenue. And an example is stamp duty. The other one is general commercial transactions, drawing the attentions of their clients to the need to actually take the tax component into account. And then you have resolving disputes. And because we have the inability to let lawyers contribute to tax policy, evolving tax policy, there are loopholes. I'll give you an example. We do have a law, I don't remember the name of the act in Ghana. It relates to the TIN, where access, for example, to court processes can be denied if you don't display a TIN. Why will anybody pass that law? But that's what the law says. Why will I rather not allow everybody to have access to justice, and rather make sure that the payment of any compensation resulting from justice is done through the court system, and therefore before the payment is made, the tax or the TIN number should be displayed. That way the government gets its taxes. So if you turn the policy upside down, you realize that you attract a larger amount of tax coming as a result of the work of lawyers. Then you have debt payments, which are created very often, and as a result, you have, as it were, the little taxes that we have collected also moving away from the system, because we allow this huge amount of judgment debts that we all talk about. And when we talk about collecting taxes, we should also look at how that money is spent. And I think these are areas that we need to. And lastly, Samson, the legal profession has, quote and unquote, not been considered in this country as a segment of the profession that is an identified segment to contribute to the economy. It is identified more for human rights, criticizing politicians, fighting against the dictatorial regime, etc. But if I take UK's economic outlook, the legal profession is identified clearly in the economic outlook as contributing to 5% of UK's GDP. That amounts to about £50 billion per annum. Okay. If I ask you how much lawyers contribute to the Ghana's GDP, nobody can tell me. It is because we overlook the multiplier effect of the profession. And that's the reason why I'm saying that let us broaden the discussion. First, let's tackle the fact that lawyers must pay taxes. That I agree. Okay. But let us broaden the discussion as to how else we can contribute to ensure that the government gets more revenue. Okay.
Frank Davis, what do you have to say about this? And from a very long time, I have had the opportunity, and because of the privilege of where I sit, to speak to, our those who lead us in the tax process. Emmanuel Kofinti is a good friend of mine. And anytime I sat in his office, the discussion had to go to how do we work on getting lawyers to pay their taxes? It's been such a worry. You continue to preach that we should keep to our core duties. A lawyer has a fourfold duty: a duty to the client, duty to the court, duty to the profession, and duty to the public. What are we doing to have such a bad name?
Thank you, Samson. This matter has rightfully come up when it has to, when the President of the Republic himself has, also a trained lawyer, has taken this charge on lawyers. Ofosu has given a rather broad view and outline or what the issues are, but I want to narrow to the specifics and take the issues one after the other. Well, I can understand why this matter has come up from you, because you are also a trained lawyer, and this was an issue which was topical at the bar conference. Now, listening clearly to the president, I think he made a very instructive statement. And what he said clearly was that the survey had disclosed that about 60,000 high net worth professionals were caught in the bracket of not fully complying with their tax obligations. And it involved the creme de la creme in the Ghanaian society. And he named them: lawyers, doctors, architects, accountants, surveyors, management consultants. So it is not only the lawyers per se who are avoiding or evading taxes. It's a broad spectrum of professionals who are involved in this exercise. So my point will be that how do we tackle this issue holistically and not narrow down to lawyers alone? Because we are not the only ones who have been found wanting. Now, Ofosu gave the broad outline. There are so many categories of lawyers who are practicing. We have companies which are unlimited. We have limited liability companies. We have partnerships. And we have lawyers who practice without any known regularized structure. You know what I'm talking about. So the emphasis, I believe, should rather be laid at the doorstep of the GRA. They are the governing authority. They are the ones to make sure that people stick to their civil duties and responsibilities to pay taxes. I cannot understand why the GRA should not be able to track down the number of law firms which are operating in the country and going after the lawyers in those offices to pay taxes.
It's easy to get the list, isn't it?
Very, very easy. This time when everything, of course, through the good works of His Excellency the Vice President, almost everything in this country is being digitized. Now, if we have law firms and the GRA can go after the law firms, there is no way any lawyer, and there is no lawyer in this country who is not earning any money. I find it very difficult to say I'm paying my lawyers salaries, but lawyers earn money. We earn a lot of money. So if the GRA is acting actively and tracking down the law firms, this issue will be abated. Because, I mean, the payment of taxes is a civic responsibility. So the GRA should be able to work on this and make sure that the firms which are registered can easily, we can go to the company office and get the list. Of course, the Bar Association has a list of laws.
That's right.
And law firms. So it's not a huge miracle. It's something that can be done. Now
the solution suggested by the Attorney General.
Yes, the Attorney General. I don't agree fully with what my good friend Godfrey said. I mean, because there has to be legislation to that effect. There is no law now which says that the practicing license of a lawyer can only be renewed if he or she has not paid his taxes. So if that is the advice being preferred by the Attorney General, he's a leader of the bar, he knows what to do. But you cannot tie the paying of taxes to the renewal of a lawyer's license. There is no legislation to that effect. So if that's the way we want to go, we should effect the necessary legislation and make sure that this is complied with. Because the only way a lawyer has his license renewed is when he's a law of good standing and he belongs to the profession. His license automatically will be renewed. So that is the way I will look at it. And I don't think we should be condemned too much. Like Ofosu said, some of us are paying taxes through our teeth. Yeah. Some of us are paying taxes. I mean, both in the realm of our legal profession and as public servants. Of course, I hold another portfolio as a public servant. So we pay taxes whichever way. So I think it should be narrowed down to what the GRA is doing. And I know it used to be the case at first, but now most I can say most lawyers are paying taxes because we have moved from the regime where a law firm was made up of only 2-3 lawyers, and then they work, everybody gets money, puts it in his pocket, and then we are all practicing and living up to standards. Because even if you don't keep up those standards, the propensity for you to attract international clientele, I mean, is limited. So I think we should not be condemned too much. We are doing what best we can do, and if there's a system which can make us more regular in the payment of taxes, why not? I mean, we'll all agree to that.
Professor PJ, what's your take on this? Godfrey Dami said, look, a corrupt group of lawyers will breed whatever corrupt, even if it's judges. That's how we all come from. So if you have a client who is coming to you and, you know, they want you to help them, as it were, escape their tax liability, rather, you know, don't work for them.
Thank you. I think all has been said by the previous speakers, and I agree with their views that generally the responsibility is not with the lawyers. And again, most lawyers I know do pay taxes, or I agree that they do pay taxes, because the way the system is set up now, there are a number of ways where you cannot just escape. And I think lawyers are also responsible citizens of the country. And so that is the case in most cases. But I think we need to look at the GRA's mechanisms to ensure that they expand the tax nets. So all that I'll add to it is that we have been educated, we have benefited from the country's resources, we have been able to get some work to do as lawyers, we have acquired a profession and some resources, and therefore the duty is on us to share, pay back to the state. But it is up to the institutions that are supposed to collect the taxes to do their job, and that shouldn't be too difficult for them to do. And I think there's also that responsibility on lawyers to ensure that we obey the law and also help others to obey the law. So if we have a client who wants to evade tax, it is a criminal act, and so we shouldn't do that. But if it is tax avoidance, that one is not an illegal act. So I think that is where the GRA also has to come in to make sure that if there are some loopholes that need to be closed, it will come by way of proposing legislation so that those loopholes can be closed. But if it is about avoidance and a lawyer advises the client to do that, so long as he's not breaching the law, then I don't think there's much of a problem there. But the problem is with GRA that needs to plug those loopholes.
The GRA says it is introducing a name and shame initiative. It's introducing a name and shame initiative. In the meantime, it is confirming that, I quote, that the temptation to think that many of them, that's professionals, are not paying is there. I must admit that there are a lot of them that are not paying. Following the president's admonition, most of them have started calling us. What do you say?
Well, if they started calling, it's a good idea, but I don't know if most of them have started calling, because my other colleagues have already said, a lot of lawyers, I believe, do pay their taxes. Some through their private practice, some of us also as public servants, we do pay taxes, yes. So I didn't catch the first part of the point you said.
It says they are going to introduce name and shame.
Yes. The name and shame thing, I don't think that is the way to go, because if you don't pay your taxes, it's a criminal act. So just naming and shaming wouldn't be enough.
Okay.
If you just shame, it's just a moral application of the law, and we should let the law bite.
Do you get that sense where some say the law is for the rich and not for the poor, and rather against the poor? When it's about professionals, lawyers, they seem to be treating those who are violating with kid gloves. But when it's the ordinary person who set up some business trying to make a living, eke out a living, we go shut their shops and we do all the things that almost cripple their business entirely.
Certainly, the law has always favored the rich. It has always favored the highly placed. So that one is not in dispute. And I'm sure in some respects we can say that it will also apply to how the law deals with lawyers and paying of taxes. But at the end of the day, the point is that sometimes it is how these institutions deal with the lawyers. It's not because the lawyers are not ready to pay the taxes or they cannot be compelled to pay the taxes.
On this table, all of you are saying that they should stop complaining and do what they have to do. Meanwhile, they don't complain to the ordinary, person who needs to pay tax. They crack the whip. Yes, David. Yes, David.
Crack the whip to us lawyers as well.
Yes, David.
Yeah, I think the situation is not being put well. They do crack the whip, like Prof is saying, against lawyers as well. Again, let me emphasize, the problem is with GRA, and some of us are prepared to debate GRA any day. I'll give you an example. Ask any lawyer who has ever represented a client against GRA. I mean, we were involved in a case, as an example, where GRA had done what is called a commissioner's ruling for a client, where the commissioner had already determined that the matter should be charged as a commission. And the commissioner was changing his stance and applying the tax against the client. And we said the GRA couldn't do that. And we filed a written cause against the GRA. Within a week, even though we were paying tax and we had a tax clearance certificate, the GRA wrote to every single partner in the firm to have each partner update his tax, the personal tax. They only go after people who either confront them, and ordinarily you would think I'm a privileged person. They do come after all of us. I have 3 GRA officials in my office now. They come every year, ask other former sector law firms. So the issue is being overstated. It is not that, it's just because lawyers perhaps have the skill to minimize their tax. The GRA should rather broaden the whole arrangement. There are a large number of lawyers in the informal sector, and they don't go after them. It is those who are paying the tax that they keep taxing more and more. That is the point.
So some of my viewers are asking that we are talking about all of this and we are not paying attention to the questions of accountability. What is the tax used for? Is that perhaps not one of the reasons people generally are reluctant to pay tax? The president said our tax to GDP is 14.3%, compares adversely to our peers. Sub-Saharan Africa average of 18% and 34% for OECD countries.
I mean, that's true. In any event, if you look at Ghana and the way the economy is structured, we should actually be doing better than the average. But we are doing, worse than the average. Okay. And I also agree with the comments about how the taxes are used. But to have the moral authority to criticize how the taxes are used, you must be paying your tax in the first place. So I think it is important that we do heed the call to pay the taxes. And then as a profession, we should stop focusing too much on politics and also talk about things like taxes and the economy and commercial issues, because those are, at the end of the day, what makes all of us thrive. So these are legitimate issues we must be discussing. Yeah.
Okay. We need to move to the next issue so that time doesn't swallow the question of tax. You want to say something before? I think what is important also is to note that the president said we have a duty. I had mentioned the duties of the lawyer, including one to the public. And he said we should be we are in a unique role to provide advisory services to our clients against corrupt practices designed to facilitate illicit financial flows of funds and tax evasion, and also that we can enhance and take an active role in literacy in taxation so that our populace will become aware of their duties to the state. Article 41, is very clear that one of our duties is to pay our taxes as we work conscientiously. Now, the other side of the issues that came up was about issues of indiscipline, misconduct, running to social media. These days, people issue rates, and the next minute the rate is on social media. But the most critical part, which we should touch on before we move on to sports, has to do with the open letter or statement issued by a group of lawyers, quite a number of them. Some of them are members of the association, some of them are not members of the association. I tried to check lawyers in good standing, and I saw some of the names, they are not there. Some of them are not with the association at all. But they raise issues. They say that the confidence in the GBA is at its lowest, all-time lowest. And the reputation of the GBA as a vanguard of truth, justice, and accountability has lost its shine. They say the GBA has to rediscover itself and navigate a clean break from the association's recent history. It has to rediscover its voice and its role as a moral conscience of our democracy. They say a number of things, that there's growing frustration with what they perceive to be a growing disengagement and inaction by the Ghana Bar Association in several situations of clear democratic irregularity and injustice. That the reputation of the GBA as the moral conscience of our democracy and a voice for justice many decades is lost. Its long history of advocacy for the cause of right and for justice made the association a beacon of hope to many Ghanaians. So let's get to that issue. And let me begin with Professor Kojo Appiagyei, because I see that the signatories, you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You are the 5th person to have signed this statement. What exactly is the problem? Wow, this is interesting, because I recall signing a petition some time back, but it didn't encompass all the issues that have been raised. So I must say that I didn't know I'm one of those that signed this petition that is before you, but I recall there was something circulated which I signed, but it looks like there's a number of issues have been added to the concerns raised. But if you ask my opinion, personally, I would say that the issues raised are a bit exaggerated, but there are still concerns about what the Ghana Bar Association could do. I think that the Ghana Bar Association has a history of being very active and being supportive of issues that relate to human rights, democracy, the rule of law in the country. And so if you go back to that history, especially in the 70s or so, when civil society activism was more or less an aberration to government and was not in place, the Ghana Bar Association found a place in its committees, especially, for example, the Human Rights Committee and so on, to be active. And that was the case in a number of other African countries where the bar associations were able to confront governments about human rights violations and rule of law issues and so on, a call for democracy. And so
playing back into when Ghana, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and there were attempts to reintroduce democracy in Ghana. The GBA also played an active role in that. And we also have a situation where in a number of cases, the GBA has risen up, go to court and confront issues where, for example, the Chief Justice, there are concerns about the Chief Justice, for example, in the Aban case and so on. So the GBA has done a lot of work in that respect. But I recall during the days of President Kufuor, we saw a situation where the GBA began to be less active and be less ready to criticize the Kufuor regime on the basis that they thought democracy is now working fine and there was no need to rock the boat if there was nothing to talk about. And that is where I think there may be a situation like this creeping now into the GBA, that there is a need for the GBA to sit up and do more. Certainly, there's a lot we can do. And I don't think that is only the GBA. In some respects, there's some sort of co-optation. Even if you look at UTAC, which is my own association at the University of Ghana, the universities in Ghana, there have also been calls that we need to be more active. It's not only when issues concern us that we need to sit up and talk about. We can talk about the churches, the Christian Council of Ghana, the Catholic Bishops' Conference. They were all very active in the past. And we still have a number of issues that the government needs to be pushed to do the right thing. Issues about corruption, issues about rule of law, and so on. So I think that is where GBA should sit up and say that we can identify certain problems that on a regular basis we can talk about, and we can set up committees and involve individuals to talk about issues that will ensure that we put the government on its toes. I think that is where the problem is, and we certainly need to do more. And if we do that, I think that perception which exists will be raised. But I wouldn't say that GBA has been very dull and not doing anything at all.
I see. What do you say, Frank Davis? That's about almost 100 people putting their signature to this statement and accusing the GBA of having lost its critical voice as a vanguard of the society.
Yeah, before I answer that, before I speak to that, let me have my last take on this tax issues. I will urge those who question and advocate what our taxes are used for to also contribute their quota to national development. Most often than not, you realize that those who make all these loud noises hardly pay any taxes at all. So you should all join in nation and country building. Now, Samson, you just commented that most of the members, you looked through the list of lawyers in good standing, and most of the lawyers who sign on to this petition, regrettably, are not lawyers in good standing. Is that right?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, I find that a bit worrying. But let's discuss.
Some of them are actually not with the association at all.
So, but let's discuss the issues as they have come. I don't know where this live protestation is coming from, that we have lost our shine, we should rediscover ourselves to be the voice and vanguard. We have lost accountability of our issues, lost our voice. But let us discuss this issue from the backdrop. You see, we have moved away from militarism and autocratic military despots and governments. And people should understand that we are now in the culture of democratic constitutional rule. We are in the era of the rule of law. So most of the issues which confront us get settled in the law courts. And whilst matters are pending in the law courts, lawyers are not allowed to comment or to run commentaries on matters which are sub judice. Now, in the past, because there was tyrannical rule, the Ghana Bar Association was seen as the vanguard and voice of the nation, because most of the other professional associations, with the greatest of respect, were not known to be voices which stood up against dictatorship. I can recall that it was the GBA and then the trade union congresses and other self-styled individuals who took the mantle against the government. So at that time, the GBA was found as the lone voice, propagating against ill will in society and fighting military dictatorship. So, because of the move away from military despots and autocratic rule to democratic governance, people think that the GBA has lost its voice. But I sharply disagree. And I want those who are pushing that line to give instances where they think that GBA is not complaining about matters which are ongoing and which affect the fabric of society. Let me give a classical example. Quite recently, this Kaka debacle, which resulted in this committee being formed to look into the killings and disturbances in Nigeria. When a committee is set up to investigate matters, and the work of the committee is ongoing, what will people expect the GBA to do? I ask. That the GBA should leap over itself and be commenting on matters which are before an investigative body. But even that, the GBA issued a statement. The GBA issued a statement that they will think that the investigations will be conducted in accordance with the dictates of the terms of reference of the committee, and that the committee will come out with a full-scale investigation, deliver their report to the governing authority, and then we see the way forward. Of course, the committee has finished its work. It has delivered its report to the appointing authority, and we are all waiting for the recommendations and whatever report will come out of it. Now, in the not too distant past, there was this issue which had to do with this 3 panelist journalists who were on a radio program and actually round down the judiciary and
the Munche 3 matter.
The Munche 3 matter. They got cited for contempt, and we know what happened. At the end of the day, they got a pardon from His Excellency the President at that time. The GBA found that situation a bit uncomfortable. That, of course, if the judiciary has been run down in such a manner, to the extent that some of them, I don't want to repeat the kind of language which was used, and the highest court of the land has been scandalized in such a manner. And GBA issues a statement that, of course, it is in the purview of His Excellency the President to exercise a pardon. But such exercise of pardon should be done with the utmost discretion and circumspection, gouging the mood of the society and country at that time.
Okay.
And when the GBA issued that statement, it's something you are in this country with me. You realize the kind of vilification, the insults that was visited on the GBA. So if in one breath, people are saying that the GBA has lost its voice, and in another breath, the GBA is condemnable of actions which are taken, and the GBA is lambasted, and we, the lawyers, do not rise up to support what the GBA is doing, can anybody complain?
Okay. Mr. Fusudote will have a final say on this. Unfortunately, time is run out on us. But there are people who will say, like Frank Davis just illustrated, presently, there is a member of parliament, sitting member of parliament, who also took judges to the cleaners, sat on television and insulted judges, berated them. And the GBA has not been heard about it. So people refer to that as well. What do you say? Are you still what you used to be?
I think there are two ways we should look at this. First is the question of who is responsible for reacting to what generally you would say affects the legal profession. And I think because of the GBA's quote unquote popularity, people often confuse the GBA with the General Legal Counsel. There are some matters regarding, for example, commentary on social media, etc., that the GBA may take a stand and other lawyers may have a different stand on it. I think it is for the regulator to come in and set the rules. On social media in particular, the last time the General Legal Counsel issued rules, to the best of my knowledge, was the 2012 guidelines on Facebook and other social media. And then the recent LI 2354, which has a section on that. But as society grows, you find that we always have to constantly respond. And I'll take us a bit back to history. In 1999, my friend Frank Davis will recall, one of the decisions, or one of the discussions at the Greater Accra Bar, at that time, I think Ayuko was the president of the Greater Accra Bar, had to do with whether lawyers, for example, should be allowed to have websites. And you find that at that time it was a relevant issue. Now it is no more an issue. What is an issue is how do we guide lawyers using social media? That's one aspect. So I want to push that to the regulator. The second aspect is the bar itself. And I agree with almost everything Frank Davis has said about the fact that the bar used to be, and those were the 70s responding to Kutu Achampong and things like that. From 1992 to now, the bar finds itself in a new position. And I will recall particularly the statement made by the president of the bar, I think in the early 2000s, Mr. Kwame Tete, who actually said that the bar was now going to refrain from commenting on political issues because we had a constitutional democracy, etc. Unfortunately, there have been occasions where the bar had, as it were, made commentary on political issues. So then you have this criticism, etc., etc. Having said that, my take on the matter is very simple. Every organization, and the GBA is one, must constantly remain relevant. And to remain relevant, the organization must check itself as to how it remains relevant at a particular moment in time. At this moment in time in a constitutional democracy, our relevance is first to our members. And the membership structure itself has changed significantly. It has changed significantly from almost an entirely litigation-based structure to a fair bit of non-litigation-based lawyers. And you find that a number of people who are not in the litigation group tend to be the ones who sign those kind of statements. I can bet that will be a very large category of them. So the relevance to its members itself is beginning to have challenges. Second has to do with relevance to its clients. And we have a large client base who perhaps may belong to one side of a very polarized society and may think, why is the bar not commenting on this and why is the bar not commenting on that? The GBA needs to take a position as to what do I do in this context? And the last one has to do with relevance to the wider society. The GBA needs to be able to specify what are the areas that I comment on and what are the areas I don't comment on. Something, I'll conclude on this point.
All right, thank you.
Myself, Justice Minka Premo, and I think Frank Davis, former president of the bar, were considered as a task force to develop a strategic plan for the bar, which we did. Now, that strategic plan has largely not been implemented to the best of my knowledge. You will find in that strategic plan, there is a lot of restructuring to be done. If we do that, our relevance will become more relevant, for want of a better word, to the modern times and these accusations. Even though I'm not entirely in agreement with accusations, but accusations are likely to become less if we become more relevant. That's the way I'll put it.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, this is all we can have for this segment, and bring in the sports guys to tell us about our search for a coach. Well, Frank Davis would have been qualified to give us some insight into this, but I think he may not want to. Thank you so very much, Mr. Frank Davis.
I'll be conflicted.
Okay, all right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Samson, for having me.
Thank you.
You're right. There's a lawyer, Professor Kwejo Apieje. Thank you so very much. So thank you all, guys. Professor Kwejo Apieje, Chair, School of Law, University of Ghana. Frank Davis, Senior Member, Ghana Bar Association, immediate past President, Accra, Greater Accra Bar Association, and Chairman, Governing Board of the DVLA. David Ofosudote, a Senior Partner, AB and David Africa. Of course, earlier we spoke to Professor Kwesi Enim. Thank you all so very much. We will take a quick break and return to ask the question, is the coach to blame for the Black Stars' poor showing?
Thank you.